Today I'm going to show you how to replace this with a gauge that you put together at home. Tire pressure gauges come in a lot of size, shapes, price ranges. So what should you buy? Well, every dial gauge that I've ever had, even though they claim to be the most accurate and claim to be the best, they've always broken. They've always given me bad readings, and this one in particular failed and let me be 30 psi off filling my tire. That's right, 30 psi. Needless to say, that one's going in the trash. These are $2 whatever gauges. Those are trash. This is a $12 Milton USA made tire gauge, and these aren't bad. I keep these in my cars, but they're still not the most accurate. And sometimes you want an accurate gauge. A lot of people do. A lot of people like to know exactly what's in their tire. I've been through 6 tire pressure gauges from the price range of $20 to $30 all the way up to $140, $150. And I can say that every single one that I've had has been junk, both digital, dial, you name it. I just don't think there's a decent tire pressure gauge made anymore that I could find that I wanted to spend my money on anymore. So my solution was to get a liquid filled gauge, and I wanted to get a USA made liquid filled gauge, but quite frankly it wasn't in the budget. This company is made in China, Winters. They were originally a Canadian company, and they have since outsourced to China, but it seems like their quality control is still pretty good, and I think this gauge is going to be just fine for just doing tires. I chose to go 0 to 100 psi. You can do 0 to 30 psi. You can do 0 to 60 psi. You can do 0 to 400, 0 to 3,000. You literally do whatever gauge you want. But for me, this goes in 2 psi increments, and I think it's going to be plenty accurate for what I want, and it'll allow me to do everything from an aired down Jeep to a 10-ply 1-ton tire. So parts you're going to need for this are obviously a gauge of your choice. Now, you get what you pay for with gauges as far as the price of putting this all together goes. That gauge that I chose was a $40 gauge. You can buy a $10 gauge, or you could buy a $400 gauge. You're going to get what you pay for. I think for $40 that'll do the job. Each one of these pieces was $10 a piece, so we're about $70, $75 into this after tax. All you're going to need is a hose, a 1/4 inch MPT pressure hose. You're going to need a 1/4 inch MPT button valve. Now, these are made to hold pressure on this side, and when you push the button, it allows pressure to come out. So for a tire pressure gauge application, we want this side towards the gauge, and that's going to allow the gauge to hold pressure after you put air in it. So you can look at it, and then when you want to release the pressure from the gauge, you push a button and that'll release the pressure. Now, something that's really important in this application is to get a free-flowing valve. This valve you can actually see through. It does not hold pressure either direction, so it allows air to free flow both ways. And that's really what you want, so that way when you push this button to release the pressure actually goes out the end of the hose. You're gonna need a little Teflon tape and a set of wrenches to put this together. So I'll show you guys how to do the first fitting, and then from there I'll leave you on your own, because it's kind of boring to just watch somebody put together MPT threads. So when you're putting Teflon tape onto some threads, you want to put it so that way as you tighten the threads, it doesn't come undone. So you're going to put it in this direction. If you put it in the other direction, it'll unscrew from the threads as you try to thread it in, and it won't seal properly. So you have to go in the correct direction. I like to hold the tape in my left hand and then just go in a tightening motion with my right. It makes it pretty much impossible for you to mess that up. And then you're just going to take this, thread it into there, and tighten it down with some wrenches. So I'm going to come back once this is all put together. I'll show you guys how well it works, and you can decide if you want to go this route or you want to go waste some money on another gauge that's probably going to break on you. These gauges, I can say they're used in industry. They are vibration resistant to an extent, small impact resistant. You know, you're not going to be able to drop it off a building. But, you know, light taps, things like that, it's not going to make it inaccurate. These things are relatively tough, and we have one at work that's really old. It's really, really beat up, but it still works great. They were made to last. They were made to be accurate. Something that I just haven't seen in the tire pressure gauge market. You know, even the liquid filled gauges that they have, they look like $5-10 liquid filled gauges, and they're asking $70-80 for these gauges, and it's just not worth it. So you make up your mind. This is the route that I chose to go, and I don't think I'm going to regret it. Here's the gauge all put together. Put the button in a comfortable spot for me. This is a pretty large gauge assembly. This is a 2.5-inch gauge. This is all 1/4-inch NPT threads and line into a nice little tire valve. And I don't know, I chose to put my buttons in line with each other. A little OCD, I guess. And like I said, this is offset, but I wanted that because it's where it was comfortable to hold the gauge, you know, check the tire, and then release the pressure. So I'm going to bring you guys down to a tire. We'll check the pressure in it, and we'll see how accurate it is. We'll just compare it to this little Milton stick gauge, since my other gauge is completely off. Alright guys, here's a video of the gauge in action. So put it on the tire, press the button, let off the button. It'll give you your reading. I'm reading about 28.5 psi in this tire, and then you just push the button and it releases. Now, this Milton gauge I just tested out, and I know when I was at the tire shop, we set these at 30. So his gauge is pretty old, you know. But I know there's not more than 30 psi in these tires. So this Milton USA gauge is reading 34. That's why I don't trust the stick gauges. I know that Winner's gauge, it's certified to be accurate within 1.5%. So that's why I made this. So I got an accurate tire gauge, well under $100, and it's serviceable. You know, if I rip this line, it's really easy for me to get another one. It's really cheap. If I break this, I get a spare. If the valve goes bad, it's really easy to replace. The gauge, if I drop it and just break the gauge, all I have to replace is the gauge. If I don't like this gauge, if I decide I want, you know, an American gauge, all I have to do is spin this one off, spin a better one on. So that's why I went this route. That's why I'm no longer going to buy pre-assembled tire gauges. It's really all they are pressure gauges, and instead I got, you know, an industrial liquid filled gauge. I think that's the way to go. You guys make up your mind, but this is just me sharing my way now of checking pressure in my tires. Have a good day.